This episode of the EV Resource Podcast is brought to you by Titan Auto and Tire. Titan has some of the very few independent auto repair shops in Central Virginia that are qualified to work on EVs and hybrids. And from hybrids to Hummers, they fix everything. For more information and to schedule an appointment for your vehicle, go to TitanAutoTire.com. Coming up this week, Wyoming wants to phase out EVs. Tesla cuts pricing across the board. Mazda brings back their rotary engine for the MX-30 and more. Well, hello, friends, and welcome to episode 137 of the EV Resource Podcast. I'm Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and interviews with industry experts. Before we get started with the news this week, I want to thank all of you for listening to the podcast. I recently received a report from Buzzsprout that shared that this podcast is in the top 25% of all podcasts on the Buzzsprout hosting platform. That is a testament to all of you for tuning in each episode, and I want to thank you so very, very much from the bottom of my heart. I cannot wait to see how we grow this year. And naturally, I'm shooting to get better, maybe even the top 10, because when looking at the current download numbers, we're already there if we just keep it going for the rest of the year. So steady on. I do have some other stats that I think are pretty neat that I will save for the end of the show. So definitely stick around for that if you're interested to kind of hear some of the behind the scenes numbers and data about the podcast. Okay, so I don't have as much of a packed show for you this week, especially when compared to last week. I know that was long and it was a lot, but we got through it. But this episode is something that I have a lot of really interesting things to get to. So let's get right to it. First up in the news, we are talking about a gasoline engine. See, I told you this was going to be interesting. Mazda on the 10th released their pricing and packaging plans for the MX-30 EV, their first and currently only EV on the market. And they announced that the 2023 MX-30 will be equipped with their eSkyActiv technology. And although it's uncertain if we will get this here in the United States, currently from what I can see, it is destined for the UK. That being said, the all-EV version is still going to be available here, even though it's only available in California. But what is eSkyActiv technology exactly? Well, I'm glad you asked. Basically, it's a rotary engine. Yes, that's right. For the first time since the RX-8 sports car, Mazda is putting its rotary engine technology into a vehicle. Although, in this case, it's not exactly what you'd expect if you've been a fan of the rotary engine. And I do have to assume, though, because you're listening to an EV podcast, that you're probably not a fan of the rotary engine, or maybe you're just not familiar with Mazda's history with the Wankel rotary engine. And well, because it's an EV podcast, I'm not going to get into that, even though the technology for what it is pretty unique and really cool. But this is an EV podcast, so I'm not going to give you kind of a history lesson on the rotary engine. I know, I'm sorry, I'm such a tease. But the point is here that the engine is not being included to make the car necessarily a sports car. It's not there to make it sound nice, even though the rotary engines do sound awesome. You see, Mazda designed the MX-30 to meet a very specific niche. They figure the average buyer only drives maybe 30 to 40 miles a day. And so they designed the MX-30 specifically to meet those daily commuting needs. And that's about it. The MX-30 has a smaller battery in its full EV version, 35.5 kilowatt hours, and that means that it only gets about an EPA estimated 100 miles on a full charge. And I've said previously that this is just completely unacceptable for today's EV market, especially when you take into account that the MX-30's starting price is $34,000. There's just too much other competition in the marketplace to really make that make sense. So there just hasn't been a good argument why somebody would want to buy that vehicle. But with the eSkyActiv technology, this rotary engine, Mazda is adding a range extender And that allows them to put a smaller 17.8 kilowatt hour battery pack in the car. So now it's a plug-in hybrid. Think of it like a Chevy Volt or BMW i3 with the onboard range extender. In the MX-30, it's a 830cc rotary generator that then turns the MX-30 into a series hybrid, where this engine has no physical connection to the wheels. It's only there to generate electrical energy on demand. And as a result of that, this plug-in hybrid actually has more power than the standard EV because, of course, you can use more energy for performance and acceleration without worrying about the loss of range or the significant loss of range. Obviously, some people are still going to worry about that. And then, of course, naturally, it's going to have a much longer range when you're using the gasoline. So, sure, they haven't let us know if we're going to get this here in the US, but honestly, I think this is exactly where they should be selling a plug-in hybrid, because the US is well behind Europe and other markets when it comes to full battery electric vehicles. The full battery electric MX-30 with its 100-mile range, I think that's better suited for the UK and the rest of Europe. Bring the hybrid here along with the full battery electric vehicle. I mean, hey, it doesn't hurt to have it as an option. I don't know that many people are buying it, but it's still good to have that as an option. People like choices. But I think that they should bring the hybrid here. They haven't said that they're going to, so I don't know. We'll see. But I want to know what you think on this one. So I'm going to make it the question of the week. Should Mazda sell the MX-30 plug-in hybrid here in the States? And if you just said that answer out loud, why not have your voice be heard? Head on over to the Patreon page. You do not have to be a Patreon supporter in order to vote and have your opinion included in the question of the week. I'll definitely have more information about the question of the week after the news segment in its normal slot, so stick around for that. We've got a couple more news stories to get through, though, and the next one will get fans of the Hachiroku, the Toyota AE86, excited. And yes, here is a reference to one of the most popular gasoline cars in the Japanese automaker's history. Who would have thought that in one episode I'd have mentioned the Mazda RX-8 and now the Toyota 86? Well, this one isn't about a plug-in hybrid. Toyota wants to pull on the heartstrings of its fans with a nostalgic duo of concepts based on the 1980s sports hatchback, the Corolla AE86, but also showcase their technology and seemingly commitment to a future without gasoline-powered vehicles. The two concepts that Toyota unveiled at the Tokyo Auto Salon are incredibly unique, even though they are both housed in the AE86 Corolla body. One of them is a traditional full battery electric powertrain, and the other, which I'm really interested in, is a hydrogen engine powertrain. And I didn't say hydrogen fuel cell on purpose because, well, this isn't a hydrogen fuel cell. It's actually an internal combustion engine that burns hydrogen. So I'll get to that in a second, but first let's talk about this full battery electric vehicle concept that they displayed. It's powered by a single electric motor that we happen to also see from the Toyota Tundra hybrid. The battery pack is from the Prius Prime and various electric components from other Toyota models. No specifications were given about this or the hydrogen vehicle, and that's probably because the purpose of these two concepts are entirely to showcase Toyota's technological intentions for the future, not necessarily a vehicle that they are going to bring to production, which I have to admit I'm really sad about. If you gave me a battery electric Toyota AE86 Corolla that looks exactly like the Torino from Initial D, oh my goodness, I don't need any other vehicles. Just give me that and I am good. But let's chat about this hydrogen engine one. For years, Toyota has been developing a hydrogen burning engine that up until this point, we've only ever seen applied in, I believe it was a Corolla and a Yaris endurance race vehicles. It's a 1.6 liter turbocharged internal combustion engine that has been altered to use hydrogen instead of gasoline. And there are obvious benefits to this over a gasoline engine. Of course, it doesn't burn any carbon. And that I think is Toyota's point. But then also it has benefits over full battery electric vehicles as well, in that it can be refueled very quickly, doesn't require rare minerals for battery production, and because there isn't a large battery, the vehicle can be lighter and smaller as well, which helps with performance. I can see why Toyota would have used this for endurance race car. Now, before you think I've lost my mind or jumped off the EV bandwagon, the eventual point I'm getting to here is that Toyota is clearly working out all of the gasoline alternatives that they can. And maybe, just maybe, the path to a carbon-free future isn't as obvious as we might have thought. Okay, who am I kidding? I have been holding that in for this entire news article. Hydrogen does not have a future in passenger vehicles. I've always thought Toyota's crazy for even investing a dime into that. And really, I was only dragging this out as a satirical play. Honestly, come on, Toyota. Let's focus on battery electric vehicles for passenger applications and forget all of this other potential nonsense. Okay, so hopefully I didn't alienate everyone. If you made it through that, thanks for sticking around. This is absolutely an EV podcast, and no, I have not lost my mind. And don't worry, you'll love this next story too. The great state of Wyoming. I'm in a great mood. Can you tell? I hope that comes through. Anyway, the great state of Wyoming, home to wondrous natural phenomenon such as Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Teton Mountains, home of the first national monument, Devil's Tower, and protector of the beloved North American elk. And if they have their way, home to the smells of burning oil, gas fumes, and the future of the oil industry here in North America. That just makes sense, doesn't it? You see, they're now very publicly against electric vehicles, which is dumb. But yes, they don't like them. In fact, they now want to phase out and eventually ban EVs entirely. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Coming from Jonna Kreider, writing for Teslarati, the state of Wyoming is considering phasing out sales of electric vehicles by 2035 to, quote, ensure the stability, end quote, of its oil and gas industry. Senators Jim Anderson, Brian Bonner, Ed Cooper, Dan Dockstader, Representatives Donald Burkhart Jr., and Bill Henderson, and yes, I'm going to reread those names because if you live in Wyoming, reach out to these fools and let them know what you think about this. It is Senators Jim Anderson, Brian Bonner, Ed Cooper, Dan Dockstader, Representatives Donald Burkhart Jr., and Bill Henderson. They are the sponsors of Bill SJ0004 in Wyoming. In the bill, the group of politicians claimed that oil and gas production has been one of the state's proud and valued industries, creating countless jobs and contributing revenues to the state of Wyoming throughout their history. The group also based their worries on a lack of EV charging infrastructure, which I got to give them that. Wyoming, in that area of the country, seriously lacks when it comes to fast chargers or charging in general. We need more of that there. So they are worried about that, which great. Okay. They say it'll make the widespread use of electric vehicles impractical for the state, which if nothing changes, sure, that's true. But guess what? Things are changing. We're going to have more of that. Shut up, you. Anyway, the bill praises gas-powered vehicles for allowing the state's industries and businesses to flourish, and they criticize the use of batteries in electric vehicles due to the critical minerals contained in them. The bill states that the minerals in the batteries are not easily recyclable or disposable, which is false, and they claim that municipal landfills in the state will be required to develop safe and responsible disposal solutions for the minerals. I'm going to keep going here as hard as it is to just not lose it and laugh. The bill then praises the oil and gas industry. It states, quote, the proliferation of electric vehicles at the expense of gas-powered vehicles will have deleterious impacts on Wyoming's communities and will be detrimental to Wyoming's economy and the ability for the country to efficiently engage in commerce, end quote. So, while I'm sure the wonderful people who live in Wyoming, including any of you who listen to this that live there, are smart and wise and wonderful and amazing people, y'all certainly aren't very good at electing public officials with those qualities. In fact, this might be the biggest amount of whining and public ass-kissing to the oil industry that I've seen all year. And yeah, I know we're just getting started, but this this absolutely takes the cake. I really don't think this bill will get passed. At least I really hope not, because it's stupid. But still, are they for real? Next, Tesla is turning up the heat on the competition. It is no secret that the EV maker has the highest profit margins per vehicle in the industry, and that is something I have said is one of their biggest competitive advantages. What has happened now is something that I predicted back in episode 128 when talking about Tesla losing EV market share and how amazing their profit margins are and how that's a huge advantage. You see, Tesla, with that huge profit margin, has room in their pricing. And now they have cut those prices across the board, every vehicle, with some models as much as 20% or more. Other automakers can't do this with their EVs. They can't. The profit margin isn't there. The price that they have is often the lowest price that they can reasonably offer those vehicles. And some of them, I suspect, Chevy Bolt, are being offered for a price that is below a profitable point. Now, of course, I don't have any evidence to back that up, but it just seems like it's too good to be true to offer that car for so little. But getting back to Tesla, with their massive profit margins, they can cut prices. CEO Elon Musk had warned recently that the prospect of recession and higher interest rates meant that it could lower prices in order to sustain growth at the expense of profit. Now, I'm sure shareholders don't like to see that, but then again, a lot of the shareholders do like to see the growth, and they're going to hold with Tesla regardless of profits. Musk also acknowledged last year that prices had become embarrassingly high, and those are his words, embarrassingly high, and could hurt demand. So we kind of saw that. Tesla has now lowered prices across the board in the US, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And honestly, I have to admit, I didn't even know Tesla was selling in Africa. So sorry, blind spot, but that's cool to see that they're there, and now the vehicles are less expensive. They also have cut prices last week in Asia. So what we see now is basically Tesla saw a demand issue, things were slowing, and they said, all right, now's the time. So let's take a closer look at what is going on. And I'm going to go through model by model a little bit, not all the details, but little by little. The Model S long range dropped from $104,990 to $94,990, or a $10,000 drop. The Model S Plaid dropped a whopping 21%, and that was the largest drop, from $135,990 to $114,990. And that is one price drop I do not understand at all. For what you were getting, the Model S Plaid, even at $136,000, hell, even at $160,000, and it didn't cost that, but just work with me here. At almost any price, the performance and value that you get in that car is equal to cars that cost twice as much, well into the $250,000 or more dollar range. So for them to now offer the Model S Plaid for less than $115,000, that is just insane. We see similar drops in price for the Model X. I won't get into that, because the real interesting ones are for the Model Y and Model 3, with an apparent intent for those vehicles to now qualify for the new tax credit. With the recent updates in price, every single Model 3 is now less than $55,000. The Performance being the most expensive, naturally, but now it's only at $53,990, which is what a freaking deal on that car. Like, that is awesome. And on to the Model Y, which previously the only option, the only trim level and option that was qualified for the tax credit was the 7-seat option on the long range. And that was only because, due to weight, it qualified it as an SUV instead of a car, where every other five-seat Model Y was considered a car and therefore needed to be under $55,000 in order to qualify. Well, guess what? Now the long-range 5-seat Model Y has dropped to $52,990, and although the Model Y Performance is still at $56,990 and doesn't qualify, which that kind of boggles my mind. Why wouldn't they have that be $2,000 less so that it would? Because at where they are now, if somebody actually could get the full $7,500 tax credit on the long range, the price difference between the two vehicles could be as much as $11,500. That's significant. So in addition to a $13,000 price drop on the long-range Model Y, the base model, it is now another $7,500 cheaper for those who would qualify for the full tax credit, meaning that a Model Y, if you ordered it today, could be more than $20,000 cheaper than one ordered in December. This is just insane. The price drops are so significant. I mean, Tesla has adjusted pricing both up and down in the past, but it's kind of been in smaller intervals. This, I think, might be the biggest price cut across the board that we've ever seen in Tesla's history. And to some recent buyers of, especially the Model Y, who were lured into purchasing in December when Tesla offered a smaller $3,750 and then larger $7,500 discount, had those buyers waited, they could have saved a ton more money. I've had more than one recent Model Y buyer reach out to me and point this out. They are not happy. But as much as I would love to feel for you all, and I certainly understand the situation, I don't mean to be dismissive in any way. I just want you to look past the point of where the prices are. Yes, you could have saved more money, but hindsight's 2020. Nobody outside of Tesla, and maybe not even obviously everybody there because it would have leaked, knew that this was coming. So look past the pricing and focus on enjoying the vehicle that you bought. The Model Y especially is a fantastic car at any price. When you bought it last month or even November, if you want to go back that far, but when you bought it, you felt like you were getting enough value in that vehicle for the price that you paid. Well, that value hasn't changed. The car is still as awesome today as it was before. And yes, I know resale values and other things are going to be tough, but I would say just hold on to the car longer and maybe appreciate that because the car isn't worth as much now, your property taxes that you got to pay on the car are going to be less, and the insurance, because the car is not worth as much, will be less, hopefully, as well now. So see, there's the silver lining. And I knew if I kept talking that I would eventually find it. Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's tough when you just bought something and now it's potentially $20,000 less expensive. I know that hurts to see that, but there is a silver lining, and that is that you get to drive that car every day. And it's an awesome car, and I would love to have a Model Y, and I don't have one, and I'm jealous. So there. All right, enough about that one. Chevy is finally electrifying the Corvette. In an Instagram post this past week, the company confirmed the debut of the electrified Corvette will take place on January 17th, this next Tuesday. There aren't any details or specs, so I'm going to save most of the information about this vehicle for next week's episode because I have a feeling we're going to have a lot more to work with. But for now, we get to know that they are going to be putting an electric motor to drive the front wheels, which makes this Corvette now a mid-engined, all-wheel drive hybrid. That is cool. So cool. And the last news story I have for you this week is one that we get to end the news on a high note. BMW has proudly announced that their i4 M electric vehicle is now their best-selling M model last year. Traditionally, BMW has reserved M badging for their top-of-the-line performance models, and while the i4 M50 isn't an all-out performance machine like the M3 or M5 or others, it does come with 544 horsepower, and knowing that that's electric, that 544 horsepower means a lot more because we don't have a vehicle that is going to only make that peak horsepower in a very, very small range. Electric motors, very, very long and flat torque curve. So that 544 horsepower in an electric car, it translates to much more real-world speed and performance than if it were 544 horsepower in a gasoline engine. At least that's the way I look at it. BMW says it sold 177,257 M-badged vehicles total in 2022, an 8.4% increase year over year. And the most important market for its M models was still here in the US, where it says it managed to sell over 15,000 EVs, including non-M models, last year, making a 4.7% increase compared to 2021. The i4M, it outsold all of the traditional models like the M3, M4, and all of the M-badged SUVs. According to Francis van Meel, chairman of the board of management for BMW M, he said, quote, "The enthusiasm of the M community for emotionally powerful performance on the road and on the racetrack has carried us through this entire anniversary year. This is also expressed in a new sales record for BMW M automobiles, which gives us a positive outlook for 2023, end quote. So it's great to see these reports of EVs outselling other models in an automaker's lineup. We've seen that a lot, actually, especially with German brands. And I'm not sure if it's something about German brands that just having an electric vehicle makes it much more attractive to buyers. But either way, here's to continued success for BMW now in 2023. All right, so that's all for the news segment this episode, but stick around. We've got a lot more action coming up right after this.
Do you own a business and want to reach EV owners and people interested in electric vehicles? EV Resource is welcoming businesses nationwide, both big and small, to become advertising partners with us across all platforms. The EV Resource podcast, magazine, YouTube videos, social media, and our webpage. For more information, please email Zach at hello@ev-resource.com.
All right, now on to our question of the week. Last week, we carried over from the week before, where I asked you all what you were most excited about in the EV space this year, 2023. Chris Lawrence said he's looking forward to GM waking up and actually walking the walk. Oh, and seeing more EV school buses in the wild. And those are both really good points, Chris. I am too also looking forward to seeing GM start getting more EVs on the road. And as far as electric school buses, there might not be, in my opinion, a more important segment to electrify because, and I forget how long ago it was, but I read an article that actually was pointing out that kids riding on the bus are exposed to more diesel fumes than those that are outside the bus. So we got to get those electric as soon as possible. Our kids deserve better. Charles Hall is excited to see large numbers of the Chevy Bolt EV and to see if the Cybertruck lives up to its hype, but he's not expecting to see Aptera, Silverado, or Equinox in production at all. Well, Charles, I know the Bolt EV and EUV will sell very well this year. They're certainly priced to be one of the most competitive options on the market currently. I also believe that we will see the Cybertruck and it will live up to the hype. It's hard for it not to at this point. I don't believe Tesla would screw this one up. And I disagree with the rest of what you said, though. I think late in the year, maybe November, maybe December, but I think we will see deliveries of the Aptera, the Silverado EV pickup truck, and the Chevy Equinox. It might not be a lot, we're certainly not going to have thousands and thousands of units of all of those, but I think we will start to see the first deliveries start to trickle out. Andy Cooper says he's looking forward to an increasingly accessible options for the larger population of both new and used EVs. Also, bidirectional chargers from hopefully Emporia, Decibel, and or Wallbox. And yes, I think the used EV market especially is going to really start to take off this year. And your last point about bidirectional chargers from third-party entities, that is interesting. I'm going to have to think on that one a little bit further. It's certainly something that I would welcome to see as well. So thank you to everyone who participated in that poll. I am excited to see what 2023 will bring. And as I mentioned at the top of this show, this week's question of the week is all about the Mazda MX-30. should Mazda sell the plug-in hybrid version here in the US? I'm looking forward to reading your thoughts. Once again, you can respond on the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/EV resource. And for the Patreon poll, you do not have to be a Patreon supporter. It is open to the public, and I have it pinned. So as long as you have a Patreon account, you will be able to log in, go to the EV resource page, and vote regardless of whether you're throwing money at me or not. Also, if you have a question or comment that you would like to submit, I accept feedback in two easy ways. You can record your voice with the voice recorder app on your phone and email that to me. And if you do, please just keep your message to 90 seconds or less in the interest of time. And you can also just send me a written email as well, both options you'd want to send to hello@ev-resource.com. I do also have a couple of other announcements before ending the show this week. First, and this is a big one, I have sold my Chevy Spark EV. I know, it kind of caught a lot of people off guard. In fact, I wasn't really considering selling it until after I had the issue with the battery replacement, and then that kind of planted the seed of me thinking about what I would do without that car. And then towards the end of the year, my brother reached out and asked me to help him look around for an affordable EV that he might want to buy. And honestly, I couldn't think of a better option. The Spark that I had, brand new battery, brand new 12-volt battery, both of those should last years. And based on his needs, it just made sense. So the Spark was the perfect option for him. And we worked out a deal, so it was fairly good for me as well. Definitely a win-win. So for now, our family is down to only one EV, the Model 3 rear-wheel drive that my wife drives. I, to replace the Spark, purchased a 2005 Scion XB with 280,000 miles on the odometer. It is not an electric vehicle for now. And yes, I have been thinking about converting it eventually. I don't know if that's a dream or something that I will take seriously. I did work out a budget. I think with 10 grand in parts and maybe a little bit of labor help. I mean, I can do most of it myself. I think a budget of 10 grand and I could actually get that converted to an EV that would have maybe 100 miles of range or so. So that would be pretty neat. Certainly would make for some great YouTube content. But for now, I'll just stick with the gas burning aspect of it. I really just needed something to hold me over until next year when I get my Aptera. And yes, it is so strange going back to a gas car after having the Spark EV for nearly 4 years. I have to relearn how to drive one of these. And I know that sounds funny, but it is so slow compared to the Spark. And I need to get used to the limitations of what it is capable, or in this case, not capable of doing. But that's okay. It does work for now. As I mentioned in the very beginning of the podcast, I got a message from Buzzsprout, the podcast hosting platform that I use, that the EV Resource podcast was in the top 25% of all podcasts with them for the 2022 year. And I did some digging, and it looks like the number of active podcasts was over 110,000. So to be in the top 25%, that is very special, and I have to thank all of you for listening. The way they judge that number is the number of downloads each episode has in its first week after being published. So then they take the entire year and average everything out. So the top 1% of podcasts that are on the Buzzsprout hosting platform had at least 4,588 downloads in the first week. And that's definitely a bit of a stretch from where we are now with this podcast. But you know what? I look forward to getting there eventually. The top 5 had at least 975 downloads in the first week. The top 10%, which is what I'm shooting for this year, at least in 2023, at 405 downloads or more. And the top 25% is more than 105 downloads per episode in the first week after publishing. So this means that I was between 105 and 405 for the total year, which if I look back at the last 20 podcast episodes, I'm averaging 360 downloads per episode in the first week. And the last 2 episodes have had both more than 400 downloads. So assuming that the targets for 2023 stay somewhat the same, I should hit that top 10% fairly easily. And if so, then naturally I'll want to set a goal for the top 5% by the end of the year. So that would be cool. I would absolutely love to grow this podcast. And yes, I have to admit some of it's ego driven because certainly it's just me. So if you like this podcast, then that means you also like the way I'm doing it. But aside from that, aside from the reflection on myself, I really feel like the more downloads that this podcast gets, it ultimately means that more people are being reached with what I feel is very important information. Naturally, if I didn't feel it was important, I probably wouldn't waste your time with it. So thank you, all of you, for listening and helping get this podcast to the top 25%. That is really cool. But the information that they sent me doesn't stop there. The top cities for 2022, where you guys are who are downloading this and listening to it, I'll count the top 5 backwards. In 5th place, the Big Apple, New York, New York. In 4th place, Melbourne, Australia. 3rd place was Chicago, Illinois. 2nd place, Los Angeles, California. And the number 1 city for the most downloads last year, drum roll please, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I know, that caught me off guard too, but congratulations to the Northern Midwest for tuning in the most. If you are in any of those cities and you haven't reached out before, I would love to hear from you, especially Minneapolis, Minnesota. That is not a place that I would expect to have very many listeners. So if you're from Minneapolis or any of those other cities, let me know why you listen to the podcast and what you're excited about, what you're interested in. I would love to have more of a conversation with you about that. All of you are much more widespread across the world than just the cities here in the U.S. In fact, 71 countries in total have downloaded the EV Resource podcast. The top 3 being, of course, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States being number 1. And that all makes sense because, of course, this is an English-speaking podcast, so I'm not going to expect somewhere like Spain or Brazil to pop into the top spot there. So once again, thank you so much to all of you who listen, and I cannot wait to see what 2023 looks like by the end of the year. Before I go, I also want to thank our Patreon supporters, familiar names for those of you who listen regularly. At the top director tier, we have Rajeev Narayan, and I think Rajeev is getting lonely. So if any of you want to join him up there at the top tier, I'm sure he wouldn't mind. And of course, I wouldn't mind either. That tier is only $25 a month, but you get a mug, a t-shirt, all of the benefits of the lower tiers. It really is, I think, a good value. And of course, naturally, you tend to get my ear. So that director tier, something I've put in there is that you get to influence what I talk about on the podcast. If you have a story that you want talked about or something that you feel is important, the people at that tier, which of course right now is just Raj, but anybody who chooses to join him, you're going to help influence the way this goes going forward. And I think that is a lot of value for only $25 a month, honestly. So definitely check that out. At the executive producer tier, we have Chris Lawrence and Andy Cooper. And I have to say that all 3 of them, in addition to being Patreon supporters, are definitely the most interactive. And the monetary support aside, I love being engaged with the community and all of you. And to that point, the Patreon Zoom call that I call the water cooler chat will take place this month on Sunday, January 22nd at 3 p.m. So if you are a Patreon supporter and want to hop on and talk EVs and have some fun, make sure you look for the post on Patreon with the Zoom invite. That should be up by the time you hear this. If you are not a Patreon supporter yet, that just means that I haven't earned it, and that's okay. I definitely want to earn it, naturally, but if I haven't yet, then please let me know how I can. Aside from the money aspect, it is somewhat of a social feedback. So if you like the podcast, let me know. And if you don't like it, let me know that too. But don't miss out on all the fun. I really am trying to get more engaged with people, and Patreon they make it really easy to do that. We are building something special here with the Patreon family, and There are a lot of benefits for throwing as little as $5 a month in my direction. All supporters at any tier get their name in the show notes, access to ad-free episodes, and a lot more. So if that sounds interesting to you, head over and check it out. It is optional, but naturally encouraged and definitely very appreciated. Additionally, because this podcast will always be free, always, I am not going to put it behind a paywall or have mandatory membership fees or anything like that. I instead choose to use advertising and affiliate connections to earn a little bit of money, and that will keep the podcast and the magazine free for all of you. So all I ask for truly in return is to consider supporting those who support EV Resource and make it possible. And I have a full listing of organizations and coupon codes at ev-resource.com/deals. I recently have added Simple Switch. They are a EV splitter, but it's wired directly into the wiring. It's not something that you plug into an outlet. That makes it a lot safer, and it's UL certified. They are offering a 10% discount. So if you are interested in an EV splitter, I would definitely encourage you to check them out. More details can be found on the deals page. I also have on the webpage a small but growing collection of products on Amazon that I recommend. I became an Amazon affiliate, so I will get a little kickback if you buy any of those things through the links that I have put there. It's not a lot, but I do need to have, I believe, at least 3 sales through that in a 90-day period in order to keep my affiliation with Amazon active. So I definitely would encourage you guys to go check that out. And if you find any products on Amazon that you would buy anyway, and I don't have it, let me know first, because I can add it to the webpage or send you a custom link. And then when you buy that, it will count towards that 3 for me, and I can continue to offer what I think are some really cool products for all of you. So that's it. That'll be all for this podcast. So thank you as always for being with me, and I'll catch you next week.